Hello, Internet. How's everybody doing today? Figured I'd just do a little bit of a live chat. I don't know, I had the house to myself, so I figured I might as well just go for it. Can everybody hear me all right? If you could just respond with, you hear me, that would be awesome. I never really know when I do these things, like how much technical issues I'm going to have. Well, like I said, I'm just going to answer some questions, just hang out. First question that I saw was Nick, thank you, asking what my first tabletop game that I ever GM'd was and how did that go. Technically, the first one was when I was 13. I got the D&D box set that had just released, and it had this little adventure you could game master yourself through. So it was me doing that. So I guess technically, but then again, it was more like a choose your own adventure with dice. But the first time I ever GM'd somebody else was also D&D. I did a solo game with my buddy Aaron, and it went pretty lame. But we already had a group that we were joining at the time, so he was wanting to like play it a little bit before we joined and actually play it under a real dungeon master, and I sufficiently lowered his expectations of how well that would go. But as far as when I did like a larger group, it would have been D&D. I don't really remember it as being, I guess, phenomenal, but it happened, and evidently I came back to it, so it wasn't too terribly bad. Let's see. Oh, Carson Smith. How did I learn of Call of Cthulhu? I had first heard about Call of Cthulhu back in the 90s. I had another friend named Aaron who played it, and he loved it. He was a massive fan of it, and he would hype it up to me. He didn't really tell me too much about it. He said it was like this 1920s thing, and there was this horror, and Aaron was this cool guy, but I didn't know anything about it. And at the time, I was really D&D was my obsession. So I didn't play it for years until I was much older. And then I watched the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society silent film, The Call of Cthulhu, which is freaking great. And after I watched that, I was like, I think I get it. Because I didn't really know much about Cthulhu at the time. So I was like, I think I get it. I want to give this a shot. And I picked up the free quick guide. It was for their 6th edition. 7th edition hadn't come out yet, and just loved it. I loved the investigative part. I loved the fact it was very story focused over how we had been doing D&D and Cyberpunk and other stuff like that, and it was very geared directly toward that to make that just that much better. So I learned about it probably about 12 years before I ever played it. See. Don Miller, thank you for the $2. What is my favorite Call of Cthulhu adventure? I think the one that I probably recommend the most is Mr. Corbett. That's one that I recommend a lot to people. I think it's very simple, but there's a lot to it. So I think it's a great adventure. But other ones I recommend, I always recommend Dead Light and Edge of Darkness. Edge of Darkness has a very special place in my heart. I don't know if it's because that adventure is as phenomenal as I think it is, or if it was because we had such a massive success when we ran it. Because I did it where they actually had to chant around the table, and I turned the lights down low. And I remember my buddy Charles, halfway through it just kind of stopped. And he's like, the 80s warned us about this. This is exactly what Dark Dungeons told us that gaming was going to be like. Oh my God. But it was a lot of fun. Let's see. Okay, Scott Knudsen, thank you for the $20. You guys don't have to pay. I'm going to try to divvy out my answering here. That's about the horror on the Orient Express, if I would ever do a campaign diary for it one day. Well, to do a campaign diary, one requires that I run it. And Horror on the Orient Express is a beast of an adventure, and I just haven't run it yet. Now, several years ago, my wife and I decided that before we ever did horror on the Orient Express, we would have to ride on the Orient Express, and that was as a dream vacation for us. Well, 2022, there's a convention called Eldritch Con, and that is uh, going to be in Europe. And it actually begins with a trip on the Orient Express. We're going to start in Paris and we go to Romania where the convention is. They actually do have tickets for it right now. The Orient Express part is pretty expensive, but I'm really looking forward to that. So that'll be in November 2022. I get to ride on the Orient Express for an overnight trip. There's going to be some sort of I guess game on it, some sort of LARP. I don't really know the details of it, but it'll also have like Sandy Peterson and Mike Mason and Oscar Rios is going to be there. So once I have run or played on the Orient Express or gone on the Orient Express, we will probably play it. But once we begin playing it, yeah, it could be like 8, 9 months before I even begin a campaign diary. A lot of times when I've begun it, we're like deep into the campaign at that point, so I can at least talk about or hint at what might come in the future. And hopefully we don't have like a TPK. That'd suck. I feel like 5 episodes in and it just stopped. But let's see. Um, oh, wow. There's a lot coming here. Hopefully we won't have that technical issue we did last time where it just booted me in the middle of it. Let's see. Sean Vieira. I'm sorry, I am going to mispronounce all your names. I'm terribly sorry about this. Against my friends to like to run Call of Cthulhu for them. Going to run The Haunting. Good choice. However, they want pre-gens. Any suggestions for characters? Well, if you're going to do pre-gens, what the opportunity that gives you is that gives you a theme that you can work with. Like all of you are in some ghost hunting sort of society, or maybe you work for a detective agency or something like that. And you can gear the characters around a central hub theme where they're a really good team. Like if you want to do modern day, you could do the one where they're actually part of like some ghost hunting show, and you could have like the cameraman and the talent that's on camera, for maybe 2 people on talent that's on camera, a producer and a sound guy and stuff like that. But you could really design a group that's got a lot of cohesion to it, and it fits very well. So if they're wanting you to do pre-generated characters, I would then kind of come up with what sort of team I could build. And that way you could build each character with some sort of job or specialty. That way they could all have their chance to shine. So, and hopefully after you do that, they'll be all like, hey, let's play again, and we'd like to make our own characters. And then you can journey into Call of Cthulhu. Let's see. Boss Man, thank you for the $10. I'm not sure if you remember me asking hidden agendas last time, but my game went really well. No one expected to be murdered by one of their own and managed to take everyone else out. Best. Well, Boss Man, I do remember that question. I do remember you. You comment pretty regularly, so I do recognize a lot of I guess my normal commenters. Man, hidden agendas can be so tricky. I think the most success I ever had running one it was with Cyberpunk 2020, and we were doing a campaign. And right near the end of the campaign, I pulled a couple of the characters aside, and they had offers from NPCs that would have required basically stealing the item and selling it, and just to see if they'd betray their party. I didn't know if they would, and then at the very end of the campaign, they've completed it and they're making their escape. And I just kept playing, but technically they won. It's over, and they're in this micro sub, and they're trying to get away from this underwater lair that the bad guy was at. And all of them suddenly betrayed each other, and then one of them pulled out a hand grenade. I don't really know why. And then another character shot him, and he dropped the hand grenade because his hand was holding the spoon down. And the grenade went off, and they're in this teeny little micro sub that's about the size of like a car, and they're under like 200 meters of water, and they all died. That was technically a total party kill, except it happened like 20 minutes after the campaign ended. We just let the camera keep rolling. And I wasn't involved. I didn't have any NPCs in it at the time. So that was my second time I've had a TPK where I was just kind of watching with my jaw dropped, saying like, wow, this is not what I was expecting to happen. But hidden agendas, the only problems that I ever have with them is I've played them in a few. I always feel very separated from the rest of the group. I feel like there's something that's preventing me from really having full cohesion with them because I've got some secret or something that I'm trying to do and not let them find out because they wouldn't want me to do it. And so I'd be very careful with them because I enjoyed the games, but like I said, I just never felt fully into the group. And I think those work better if you're playing with people that you've played with a while and you're very comfortable with. With both of those were like games I was doing online with online friends, but there was people I hadn't played with before, and because I had never played with them before, and then I came in with a hidden agenda, I felt very separated from it. And I think that would have been a lot better had I had a very strong gaming relationship with them to begin with. In that way, that wouldn't have felt like an obstacle. But glad it worked for you. Let's see. One day I will have a producer. I once had my buddy George do this where you could go through questions for me. And what have we got here? Since I enjoy free leagues, Alien, what I consider forbidden lands from the same company. This is from Zane Crane. I don't know. It just depends on the setting. Alien, I had to do Alien because it's freaking Alien. And so many people had told me about it as far as how well it worked, because it did the convention circuit for some time before it had its big release. So a lot of people had played it and had experienced it and been like, oh my God, you got to try this. But, it's also because I'm a massive Aliens fan since I was a kid. It came on late at night and I wasn't supposed to be up. Ended up watching it and absolutely loved it. Elliot Chapman, thank you for the £5. Let's see, Alan Stanley, Deadlight, brilliant. Deadlight is so good. The suggestion that I made when I did my review of it, which worked so well, so I recommend this. This is the only way to do it, which you'll probably come up with a better one. But I had sent the PCs off on a mission. They were supposed to go see this medium for a seance or something that was like up in Ipswich or something. And the players thought that was going to be the adventure. Like they were going to see this medium and something supernatural was going to happen and blah, blah, blah. That would be the Call of Cthulhu adventure. And then on the way there, like they're going to go in 2 cars. One of them had car troubles. They all piled into one car. And I said, it's raining. And then I nailed them with Deadlight. And they actually never even made it to Ipswich. The seance was well over by the time they got out of there. But it hit them so out of the blue. That's what made it very successful. Versus if you just started off and they're on the road, they know something's probably going to happen on the road. But we actually started it like the day before at this party, and they get this invite, and they're like, oh, tomorrow come to this medium. And so they were so set that this is what the mission was, or what the adventure was going to be, that they were actually well into Deadlight, dealing with this girl, and they go to the cafe, and one of them's still like, man, we need to get on the road. We have to go to that medium. At first, I thought that was role play. To one of the other players, I kind of whispered, like, dude, this is the adventure. And he's like, oh. So I just thought he was doing a great job role play, but he was still so set on this is where the adventure was. It was happening around him, and it hadn't dawned on him yet. But great adventure. Let's see. Oh, Neil Camilleri. Thank you for the Traveler series. Well, the Traveler series was a lot of work. Oh my God, the technical aspect when you do a video on all the rules mechanics. I always think it's a great idea when I start them, and then it's like the 3rd episode in, I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? I'm glad it's helpful. I'm always terrified I'm going to be giving wrong information. So I always have at the last episode, these are the parts where I screwed it up. But I don't want to somebody to learn the game just wrong from me. I did have some guy like rant at me because I said house rules. He's like, you should never give house rules in a how-to. It confuses people. It's like, I think I'm pretty clear when I'm doing a house rule. Let's see. Let's see. This was from Kit, and then the chat went away. Where'd it go? Oh my God. Let's see. What are the murder scenes and Ghost Ship hold up? Um, Ghost Ship is in the movie. Ghost Ship, the fantastic B movie where that wire goes through all those people. It's completely unrealistic, but I love it. That is such a wonderful bad movie. I think originally the producers or something were wanting to do it where like every year they would have like some sort of scary movie come out at Halloween, and Ghost Ship was either the first or the second in those, and then they evidently fell through. But Ghost Ship, classic. Let's see. Um, G Dog. Hey Seth, have I ever considered doing a live game with my friends? Nope. I've talked to my players about it, and it is a unanimous. We do not want to do live games. Gaming days are for us. We're a bunch of old friends. We want to be a bunch of dorks hanging out, and having a camera in the room would feel intrusive. It kind of take away the relief we have of just having a nice, relaxing game day. If we feel that we have to perform for the camera, we have to deal with technical issues. We just want to play and be friends and hang out. So it's just not our jam. So that's just our thing. And since none of my players want to do it, then it's just not going to happen. But I also don't want to do it either. So I'm not gonna try to push it on them. Jake Cooper, have I ever looked at the Dracula dossier? No. Carlson Smith. Oh, here's a good one. As an aspiring author, how do you find time to write? Well, finding time to write, you just have to make it. You will always find some way to procrastinate. The method that I picked up when I first started, and I first started writing seriously shortly after college. It was probably about 24. I gave myself a deadline of one chapter a month. Come hell or high water, I would do one chapter a month. Didn't specify how long the chapter was. Could be a short one, could be a long one. And I would stick to that rigidly. And if I finished my chapter early in the month, it was like, cool, I can go out and see my friends and stuff like that. But if it was getting near the end of the month, I actually would like cancel plans or not go out in order to finish that, because you have to stick to that deadline. I've known so many authors that wouldn't do a deadline for themselves, and then they would get distracted. Life happens, and they put off writing, then they never get back into it. And so have some sort of easily attainable deadline that you give yourself. Don't make it something huge. Don't say it's like, I have to have 20,000 words in a month, which is like, that's a pretty big goal. In an ideal month, you could do that, but in a month where work is busy, and then you got some family obligations, and washing machine goes on the fritz or whatever, you might not be able to make that. And then once you fail that goal, it suddenly starts becoming harder and harder to keep going, because like, well, I already fell off the bike. Why should I try as hard? So make it a really easy goal that you think, I can achieve this in the worst of times, and then just stick to it. But if you make it something you can only achieve in the ideal conditions, you're not always going to be able to make that, and then it starts becoming very burdensome on you. So that's my best advice on how to write and keep to it. Let's see. Will Logston. What do you do about the long-term viability of the alien in a campaign? I'm on West March's style. I don't know. I haven't tried Alien in a campaign form. I think the biggest problem with Alien is that it's Alien, and it's probably as good as you're ever going to find if you want to play a game that's like the Alien movies. But I don't know how well that's going to work in a long-term sort of campaign. I would love to see what Free League puts together as far as an example, because I think once you find the aliens and you know about the aliens, it stops losing a lot of its punch if it just really just becomes bug hunt after bug hunt. So I would like to make it more exploratory. Pookie from Reviews from Guerrilla told me years ago on like one of the early incarnations of Alien, which is very different than the current edition. He had a GM that ran him through a campaign of Alien that was very successful. And how he did it was, they were Space Marines, and they actually had like several adventures where they were just doing space marine stuff. They were stopping an uprising, they were dealing with catastrophes, they were just being space marines. It had just kind of become a space marine game. And then, like, the fifth or sixth adventure somewhere, once they were really comfortable with we're just space marines doing space marine crap, all of a sudden there was aliens, and all of them were like, "Holy shit, what do we do?" And like, it actually freaked them out because they had gotten so comfortable in this role of just being space marines that just happen to be using alien. I think that would work brilliantly. I don't know if I, as a GM, could pull that off, because I'd be all like just too excited to get to the aliens. I don't know if I could do that many adventures with like, just wait, I'm about to throw the curveball at you in a bit. But Boogie was really complimentary of that, so that is a way you could do it. But then again, once the aliens are out, I just don't know how long you could keep that campaign going and still feel as punchy. It'd be like if you're playing D&D and it's like just orcs or just drow elves. After a while, it's like, can we get a little bit more diverse here? So I think you would have to have some sort of long-term goal with some objective that you were trying to do. Maybe to get to one of the ships with the black goo, or get to some sort of planet. You have to go to this place, this place, this place, and fight the infestations. But I'd have to see it. I don't know how well it could be done versus how other games you could do it. Some other games, it's pretty easy to do a West Marches style game. Alien, I don't know. Let's see. Wonko Sane. Seth, you may know this already, but I regularly see your name along with Matt Colville on Reddit as videos DM should watch. Oh, that makes me happy. I'm glad that people at least recommend me. You always wonder, like, how helpful a lot of the stuff I say is. Let's see. Stu Label. You've been an amazing presence in the RPG world. I'm GMing, playing, reviewing. When did you come up with your video podcast idea? Do you have inspiration? Well, the video podcast idea, I've been meaning to put together a channel for some time after my first book came out, and I just didn't know what I could ever put a channel together about. Like, people would recommend I do writing, but I didn't know if I could do a whole channel dedicated to writing. I think there's people that could do that a lot better than me. Brandon Sanderson has an amazing one that he does. And then one day I had a terrible, terrible session. And I ended up having to let go of a player that I played with for some time. And I was very, very upset about this. And I kind of sat down and I wrote out what I refer to as the RPG social contract, as far as what everyone's responsibilities and obligations are during a game. And I said, I'm going to make this into a video. So I had a little post-it note with some bullet points on it. I set up a camera and I did it in one take. I had no audio. I didn't know how to edit. I had no script. It was terrible, but it was the first video. And then the second video was easier, and the third video, and then it kind of grew from there. As far as coming up with ideas for content, I have like a little folder that's really just got tons of half-written sentences of far as ideas that I could do in the future. Sometimes I'll go in and cross them off, or sometimes I'll go in and be all like, I don't really know what to do. Or if I'm doing a list video, I'll kind of group them, because I've got like this massive list of player sins or GM sins and that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, let me find like 5 or so that are similar enough that I can at least have a theme going with it. So I just kind of come up with them. It's also part of the reason why I can be so slow on it. Like, I did that combat one recently, and I was like, well, this is a sequel to the one I did 2 years ago. So I don't really have like a plan as far as like what I'm going to be doing next month. It's just, I'm usually about one video ahead as far as what I'd like to do. And even then, at the last minute, I sometimes change it because something shiny comes along and I'm like, man, I'd rather make a video about this. Let's see. Andre Fernie, have I taken a look at the Cthulhu Mythos Bestiary for D&D 5e? Well, there was the Peterson one that Sandy put together. I flipped through it, but I don't play 5e, so mostly I just looked at the pictures. I like the fact that with the Peterson one that the gods are more like forces of nature versus giant monsters, and I really liked the way that he did that. Sandy had told me that he had wanted to do it that way originally in Call of Cthulhu way back in the day, and he was overruled on it. So the Cthulhu had hit points and Lethality had hit points, but he wanted them to be so alien and so weird that the concept of killing them was gone. And I don't know if that was because at that time it was still looked at in that sort of D&D way that every obstacle should have hit points or whatnot, or if Greg Stafford wanted to have some sort of potential that maybe hunting down Cthulhu could be a future thing. I don't know. But once Sandy did his 5e and then Pathfinder Cthulhu Mythos, he's like, I'm going to do them the way I've always pictured them. So I really like that. Del Monte, what's my take on OSR? What do I think of old school D&D stuff? I've never really looked into the OSR stuff. I grew up playing first edition. So, for a lot of people, the OSR is a way to recapture that. And it's like, well, I already got the original. That was my primary game for years. I did first edition, then we did a first and second edition hybrid. Then third edition came out. We played that for a year or two and maybe like a year and a half. And then we flipped back to our first to second edition hybrid, and we played that for several more years. And so I'm very comfortable with it, but I also think a lot of the new stuff works better. Problem with the old editions is they actually were bizarrely complicated in ways, which I knew it very well because I've been playing it for so long. But I think a lot of the new OSRs at least bypass the fact that sometimes it's like you roll high on this, roll low on this, and they're kind of goofy. But I don't know if people enjoy them. I usually don't go for a lot of the OSR stuff because I like larger and beefier games and more contemporary games. I'm referred to a lot as an old school GM because I will review old stuff, but a lot of times when I used it, it wasn't old then. So some of it's cool. Some of it I just don't really care for, just because I don't really see a need to play it, especially if it's like a old D&D clone. I've got the old D&D already, so I've just never felt compelled to learn a clone version of it. Let's see. Jack of Hearts 22, thank you. Have I ever made a character and thought, yeah, they're a PC in this game? Well, if I'm making it to be a PC in this game, that's a requirement. I've done it where that I've ended up making a character that I realized is really just a better NPC for a game. But by the time I'm actually making a character, like writing it out, I already know what they're going to be. I've come up with concepts, or a lot of times when my buddies and I are just kind of just chatting, and then I'll come up with a character. It's like, yeah, that's going to be someone, but never during character creation. It's always before. By the time character creation happens, I'm really just doing the paperwork on what I already know, unless it is something like Traveler, which is a discovery process and making a character for that, if you're doing it the normal way. Oh. Nash, having played your adventure of Mother's Love, I'm curious, how do you keep players from rushing straight to the end and investigate more of Innsmouth? Okay, well, actually, I'm going to be posting a video for Mother's Love tomorrow. It's only like a year after it came out. I'm finally going to do a video on it. With that adventure, there's a couple steps they have to do before they can figure out where the gang is hiding. So they'll at least have to go through a few of those steps to figure that out. But the key to that adventure is they're not supposed to engage with the mythos. They are to catch these bank robbers and get the money back. And the reason I did it differently is just about every Call of Cthulhu adventure out there is the goal is you're to interact or stop the mythos. And I figured if we're going to be doing this in Innsmouth, and any players have any idea of Innsmouth from the Lovecraft story, they're going to want to engage with it. They're going to want to metagame. They're going to want to check out the Marsh Refinery. They're going to want to check out the Esoteric Order of Dagon. They're going to want to investigate all the weird noises going on in the Gilman house. So how that one works is, if they do that, if they try to metagame, if they try to have a tour of Innsmouth that they're already familiar with out of character, that is not going to go well for them, because Innsmouth, they are going to be overpowered. It is an entire town that is in this cult, and there are inhuman monsters around every corner. So the key to that adventure is they're not supposed to investigate too much, but you put little things in front of them to tempt them to. If they rise to the bait, that's where they can put themselves in trouble. So that's where you have stuff like the storm, when you could hear the Shoggoths across town doing their little song to get them to investigate, or the sounds in the hotel, or the weird faces that look at them through windows. If they start trying to look too much into the cult of Dagon, and like the little kids that were doing the little jump rope song. And then, of course, once they get to the end, there's the bell. And when I ran that, I ended up play testing that one twice. We had the first run, and I found some holes. And the first run went well, but I found some holes, so I went ahead and fixed it up. And we did the second one. It worked beautifully. And then my buddy Matt McLeod, I think, has run that thing like 15 times. But with the first one, they hit the bell, and you're not supposed to hit the bell. But they did, because they knew they were playing Call of Cthulhu. They wanted to see what happened, and that's what ended up doing them in. If they really do stick to the goal, that's how they do it. Your job is to try to tempt them, but really they're more successful if they don't investigate the weirdness of Innsmouth, and they just keep directly to what their objective is. You're just supposed to be off to the side, getting them to look at you, and then if they look at you, get them. The other one, though, to remember is the phone call. They should be making a phone call to an employer every night, because the phones are being listened to, and that is a good way to also have an employer tell them to kind of focus and stick on track, which I'll cover all that in the video tomorrow. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the adventure. Let's see. G-Dog. Question: if somebody's getting into writing myself, would you recommend having someone read it over as you're working on it, or after it's already done? I do it as I'm working on it. My buddy Jesse has read every word I've ever written, and including every terrible word I've ever written. So we'd hang out like once a week, and he'd kind of read over what I was working on, and then I would recommend a writing group. That way you can have people give you advice as you're working on it, usually like per chapter. I've never written like an entire novel and then had somebody look it over, because at that point you've committed so much time to writing an entire novel. Short story, yeah, I'll do a whole short story before somebody looks it over, because the short story flow of the beginning, middle, and end. But usually if I'm asking to look it over, it'll be a completed chapter, and get their feedback, because a lot of times they'll give you feedback that might actually change the course of where it's going to be going in the future. So I highly recommend having people look it over. Sometimes they'll find plot holes. Sometimes they'll throw in a cool idea, and you're like, "Ooh, I'm going to steal that." But really recommend it. Always have somebody look over your stuff, because it's very difficult for you to see your own mistakes. It's actually impossible for you to edit yourself, because deep down what you're trying to say. You have to have a third party look at it and tell you if you were effective in saying what you were trying to say. The other trick is you don't want to tell them too much about the story before they read it. They need to read it kind of ignorant. That way, if there is a hole that you didn't explain in the story, but you told it to them, and they don't fill that in automatically. They need to be able to see any holes as far as anything you didn't properly explain. Oh, Benjamin 2000, thank you for the $5. How would I ease a group into a system with greater power than they're used to, going from Dungeons and Dragons to Exalted? I'm familiar with Exalted, but as far as easing them into any system, Well, one, you want to warn them. You basically, they need to know beforehand, like, hey, this is the goal. But I usually do start it off a little bit tamer, let them see it. I also very upfront. So, like, look, your initial characters aren't necessarily going to be the characters you stick to because they're probably going to die. Very rarely do they, but they at least have that fear coming in. That I'm warning them, like, oh, this is going to be so much more lethal. This is going to be so much more powerful. Sometimes it is. And once they start getting a little bit used to it, I then just start inching the power up on them until we've all gotten used to it. Because I also have to get used to it too as the GM, as far as picking up this new system and kind of figuring out what's appropriate. Because I don't want to throw them in a new system and then like I underestimate everything, and then I throw an opponent against them that has been ridiculously impossible, and now they're like, this system sucks, and it's because I screwed it up. So I usually start them off real tame, kind of work my way up, but the whole time I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad, this is going to be bad. And then by the time I'm actually really throwing the bad stuff at them, they've gotten used to it, they know what to expect, and they've kind of got their system down and their comfort with it. But just baby step it, but make sure they know. Oh, I see people are talking about doing predators and aliens. Yeah, there's a licensing issue. I'm 99% sure that's what it is, though that would be freaking badass to throw in some predators against your aliens and that. Um, Nor'easter, will I be doing a review of Berlin and the Wicked City anytime soon? Well, I haven't played it, so no. If I do play it, I will, but right now we have so many different things that we're planning on doing that it just really comes down to time. Right now we're finishing up Traveler. This month we should be finished with the campaign we've been doing for the past year. So hopefully that goes well. And then after that, we're going to do a little bit of a palette cleanse, a couple little one shots, and then we're going to finally dive into Cyberpunk Red. So when I can get back to like a Call of Cthulhu campaign, that's too far ahead of time. And by that point, well, it'll hopefully be something like Orient Express or something, but we'll see. Depends on my player's mood. Depends on my mood once we get closer to it. If I think something's a better fit for them, I'll always go with what's the better fit for us than necessarily any hype around it. Because if the games we play, I play with my players for my players. So if Berlin the Wicked City is something that calls to them and they're like, hell yeah, let's do it, we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll do whatever gets them excited and makes them want to, make characters and play it. I have terrible rolls. Question: any current impressions, thoughts on Cyberpunk Red? Um, a couple, but I don't want to say too much because I actually have not played it. We've made characters. I've read through the rules. I spent by poor John John the Wise was a channel on it. He and I chat. So I ran him through a gauntlet like a week or two ago because I was going through fight rules. I'm like, John, what the hell do you do here? My impression of Cyberpunk Red is it is a much better cleaned up version from Cyberpunk 2020 was. I love the way they changed certain abilities, like with Moto and Nomads. I love the way that combat sense works. I love the way that all the special abilities work now. I think they're freaking fantastic. Combat, I'm not completely sure on. I feel that in their effort to streamline it, they did do a good job, but they might have streamlined certain sections a little bit too much to the point that it lost part of what I've always loved about Cyberpunk combat. John has assured me that it plays differently than it reads, so I will see. But right now, my wife and I were going through it, and we're both kind of like, it doesn't give that same John Woo vibe that we used to get with Cyberpunk 2020, where it's like, I'm going to run across the room because I'm harder to hit, and I'm going to have a gun in each hand, and I'm going to leap through the window firing two guns. Those mechanics aren't the same, which means it does play faster, but at the same time, it loses some of that edge. But we'll see. It very rarely do combats play the same as they read, and I'm going to give it a chance because I've been looking forward to Cyberpunk for years. So, but I just haven't been able to dive into it because we've had that Traveler campaign, and I wasn't going to quit a Traveler campaign because the new Cyberpunk came out. Let's see. Oh, wow. There's been a lot more chats going on. Okay. Bratters, thank you for the £5. How would I balance regaining max sanity? I've ran that any POW increase will add to max san long term. Okay. With maximum sanity, so the maximum can only go up if their POW goes up, and there's only a few ways you can raise POW. There is through casting spells. You can basically steal some POW from another person, or if you're in an opposed POW check, you can get it. So it can go up, but I also would, if their POW goes up, I would give them the appropriate amount of sanity to boost, but that's my call. Other keepers would do it differently. Ultimately, though, their sanity max, if they're learning spells and all that, is going to be on a downward trend. So I don't really see that as much of a problem. If there is a issue where all of a sudden like their POWs are hitting 200, you got another issue going on, because that shouldn't be happening. But I really, if they're getting a POW that's like, hitting 100 or maybe a little bit more just due to spell casting, sure, but there's obviously something going on if they're casting spells and getting to do that. So you're already chewing through their sanity and max sanity to begin with. So let's see, is that like a problem you've had? Because our one character that has been the best spellcaster, her POW has gone up, but right now I think her max sanity is at like 40, just because she has read so many books. So and at this point, her Mythos was higher than her San, so she gets half off San saves, but she is on that just inevitable decline. And we're actually really looking forward to permanent insanity for that character. We think that would be the perfect retirement for her. Oh. Sorry, what RPG are we talking about? Just joined. I don't know. We were talking about Call of Cthulhu. I don't know what I was talking about at the time you asked. Let's see. Deep Whispers. I miss the good players who make bad characters video. Any chance you could get older videos and unlisted playlist rather than outright privatized? A lot of those topics I do want to hit again. A lot of the older videos, especially the list videos, I was never happy with them. I always felt just, I don't know, there's kind of a scummy feeling to it. One, the equipment on them was just terrible, but there was a much more in-your-face sort of thing, and that's not me. Also, some of it, since I was actually just starting off with that particular video, that's still to date my most popular video I've ever done, and I wrestled with taking that down for months before I finally just said screw it and did it. Just because yes, it was popular, yes, it brought a lot of people to me, but I don't fully stand by not necessarily what I said, but how I presented it. For example, in that one, there's the character, the 13th Warrior. It was only after I had posted that I could see responses that I had made a strange assumption that people would know what a theme game was. So a lot of people were trying to defend 13th Warriors, but they clearly didn't understand what a theme game was. I hadn't established that because, I've been doing it for so long. I had kind of forgotten that a lot of people don't know what theme games are. So I will revisit that topic later, but it will begin with talking about theme games and all of that. But there was only 2 videos that I took down that were just gone, and it was that one and one other. The rest of them I stuck as unlisted somewhere, but as far as I'm concerned, they're gone. Any good stuff on there I can put in some future and expanded video, but I don't know. I just didn't like them anymore. When I'd sometimes get comments on it, and it was kind of this like, that video's still out there. So I'm glad people enjoyed it, but I can do a lot better now, and I just didn't like the way I felt around them. Paul Crosslin, thank you for $20. What am I running right now, and what am I running in the near future? Well, I just said that. We're finishing up Traveler this month. We're also doing a little bit of Cult on the side on Wednesday nights, just because. But we'll be gearing up to play Cyberpunk as our main game going forward. Cult really wouldn't work well for our main game. Not all my players would dig that, so we've just kind of got this little side game that's got just a couple of us playing it because we'll dig it, but I wouldn't do that for my whole group. The other two players, except my group's 5, the other 2 players would not enjoy it, and I'm not going to subject them to a game they don't enjoy. But the 3 players that I'm playing it with, they do dig it, and we're enjoying the hell out of that as our little, once a month or every couple weeks Wednesday night gig. Let's see. Tom asks, question, do I have any generic sci-fi RPG tips? My Traveler Guide's very good and entertaining. I don't know. Again, I'm trying to think of any generic sci-fi tips, but the only one that I can say is with most sci-fi games, whether that be like a cyberpunk genre or full-on space opera genre, equipment is the magic items of the future, but they're available all over the place. So you don't let your players become so focused on good equipment, or you making it just all the super powerful equipment is always like all available to them, unless you are prepared for how powerful that will make them. Like if you start giving them all Martian power armor, like from The Expanse, and they're just walking around taking tank shots, that's cool. But if you're not prepared for that's the result of you giving them that much equipment or that much access to equipment, a lot of game masters get themselves in trouble because they allow the characters to get more equipped than the GM is actually wanting, the type of games the GM is wanting to run. If you are wanting to do massive high power, go for it. But if you're wanting to have a little bit more down and dirty, that technology should be a little bit harder for them to just come by, or more expensive for them to buy, to the point that you can at least keep them low. Because with those games, if they get so armored, you have to up the weapons that could possibly hurt them. Well, if you've got one character that's not super armored, that now means that all the weapons that could possibly hurt the super armored people, they're now an instant death to them because the weapons are so powerful. So, which we always refer to this as escalation in the games, where if the players start escalating themselves, I have to escalate in order to keep up and keep challenging them. So keep in mind as far as what technology you allow them to have access to, or easily access to, because they can run away on you if you're not prepared, or if you're not wanting to get that strong on you. So that's about it. Good luck. Let's see. What do we got here? Captain Twitch, question. What is my least favorite story or Call of Cthulhu adventure? That's actually a really hard one for me to do, because I don't, the moment I rule it out, like I'm done thinking about it. But there's one that does come to mind a lot, and I've never reviewed it because I never ran it, because I don't like it. And that is, it's called The Pale God. And it is, I believe it's from the book, The Great Old Ones. It is a Call of Cthulhu adventure that has the best damn opening hook of any adventure I've ever read. It is freaking great. I think that adventure is a hook, and then there is nothing after that. Like I think the author came up with a hook that was great. They're all like, yes, and then the rest of the adventure just falls flat. It's pointless. It doesn't really have a plot. It just goes nowhere. It doesn't really help you run it, because it doesn't really give you anything to run. It just gives you one hell of a badass reason to get engaged with this story, and that's where it just kind of stops being good. So, killer opening, crappy follow through. The J.J. Abrams problem where it's like, good hook, didn't have any plans for what to do after that. So that's the one I usually pull up as far as like least favorite, but I'm sure I've read worse, but I don't commit it to memory. I then just flip to the next adventure, see what else I could do. Carson Smith, question: do I prefer science fiction, horror, or fantasy? I prefer a darker fantasy. Once upon a time, horror was just kind of mixed in with it all back when it was weird fiction. And then when I was young and I discovered Clive Barker, I didn't realize that Clive Barker, most of his stuff, his novels are not horror. They're dark, but they're fantasy. He does a lot of portal fantasy. And so I really love that. I love a good fantasy story with a dark edge. I actually prefer a contemporary time period over historical fantasy, like epic fantasy. So horror fantasy, I guess, is my preferred. I enjoy good sci-fi. Bad sci-fi is terrible, but a good sci-fi is an absolute blast. So I enjoy a lot of like Gibson. Right now, I'm doing an audiobook of Mark Miller's book that he did in his Traveler universe, Agent of the Imperium. I'm enjoying the hell out of that. It's a weird book, but I'm really, really digging it. So I enjoy them all, but I like the darker and I like a little bit more of the fantasy. Mm-hmm. Okay. Question from Elithdlor. Sorry. What sort of success have I have utilizing natural hazards in D&D at all various levels, things like temperature, extreme, and non-magical storms? Oh yeah, I've done a lot of that. Now, I never did it with 5e, but with first edition, there used to be these two books. There was the Dungeoneer Survival Guide and the Wilderness Survival Guide. And those things were badass. And so I would have a lot of adventures where, like this week we're going to the frozen north, and then we'd get all into the survivability factors as far as what we're doing with extreme colds, and they have to equip themselves, or sometimes we throw them in there and they're unequipped, and it's like now we have to do all this survival in order to get to some equipment or to make some equipment, and then we can keep going with the adventure. It doesn't really work as well for my players and I if that is the main focus of the game. I like to have that as an obstacle or flavor. I like it to be a threat, but I don't like if the whole game is just about trying to survive in the cold and all we're doing is making rolls on that. That sounds kind of boring. But I do like the idea of the characters get there and it's the initial scramble, like we're in trouble, and now once we've gotten equipped and gotten used to it, we can go forward. But this is a constant threat we have to be aware of. It's just more of a background threat. Or they get there and they're equipped and they're all ready for it, and then something happens and you take some of that equipment away, or a significant portion of that equipment away, and now they have to adapt without it. But those are usually kind of like, at the very beginning or kind of in the middle we do it, but not throughout the whole thing will it always be a constant threat, because the players then still want to go kill the monster and be badasses and not constantly worrying about survival like you're watching some Leonardo DiCaprio movie or something like that. But used it a lot. It usually does require a lot of research on any rules environments. I also recommend watch a bunch of movies and stuff that take place there to get some really cool ideas. Describe like sandstorms, or describe all the mosquitoes and how wet everything is if they're going through a swamp, and really get into the mood of it more than the mechanics. The mechanics definitely need to be there, but you get into the mood, you show the mechanics, and then once they've learned to overcome it or whatnot, they've made their necessary rolls, you can keep it going with the mood because they know there is a mechanical thing in the back of their head that relates to. And that's just good scenery. Mabel Personal, $50. Oh my God. Hey Seth, I've got a tabletop RPG project that I'm working on. I was wondering if you'd look it over and give feedback how I get to you. Probably not going to have much luck with that. One, just because it's an RPG project, that doesn't tell me anything about it. For all the stuff that I review has to meet certain qualifications, mostly that it fits what I want to play and what my players want to play, and we've got an opening for it. But you can email me, but email me the information about it. Just because it is a project that tells me nothing, like what's it like, what can you compare it to that I actively play or have talked about before. Basically, you have to do a pitch. And this is the same advice I give for authors wanting to ever sell books: is give me a sales pitch why I want to look at it, what makes it different, what makes it so awesome that I'm like, oh my God, yes, let me look at it. But even when I've had professional publishers offer to send me stuff, it still has to meet the qualifications of, does this look like it's going to be fun for my players and I and what we want, and do we have an opening for it? Because right now, like I said, we're finishing up a Traveler campaign for the past year. I have people always getting on to me that I should be playing Cyberpunk Red. It's like, oh, we're playing Traveler. We'll wait. Let's see. Tips for making modules combat challenging without being overwhelming. Trying to make a module based off the premise of the thing, but it is tricky, as William Franklin. You can make it challenging without being overwhelming, but it really depends a lot on the system that you're running. It's a lot harder if you're doing it in D&D. D&D is very, very combat based. Its foundation is based off of combat gaming. It has evolved a lot over the years to where it's not as bad as it was in earlier editions, but that DNA is still there. If you want it to be tricky but not overwhelming, the best suggestion that I could give with something like The Thing is, when you introduce it early, which they did in the movie The Thing, like, boom, there's a monster, but have it be to where it isn't necessarily always attacking them, but they are always having to be aggressive against it, making more of the creeping dread coming for them. So this thing it's hard to kill. They have to get every single cell in order to destroy it. So have it be where they are engaging it more than it is engaging with them as far as any sort of combat, because they know that they have to constantly get it covered from all around as it's kind of coming at them, as it is, in the case of The Thing, taking over more and more, and the allies are becoming less and less, and you don't know who is the bad guy and who is not. And they know that it is a matter of time before they are overrun, versus it just charges at them periodically, because that can get very overwhelming, and you want to have the mood of the paranoia and the creeping growing dread. So I would usually compare something like that more to Night of the Living Dead, to where over the course of the night, more and more zombies come. It's this kind of slow growing problem, and they know that they have to scramble in order to get out of the way in time, because trying to take it head on is not going to work as a long-term solution. Let's see. Man, sometimes this chat just goes flying weird. Like, it's like, I always see like, oh, here's a good question, and then boom, it's gone. Okay. Sean Murphy, Seth, longtime Cyberpunk 2020 player. Love your channel. Keep it up. Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy it. I think Cyberpunk was the very first game I reviewed on the channel. It's a very old love of mine. Sisyphus Happy. Hey, Seth, glad I could catch you live. Finished Ashes of Onyx recently. Great story. Who are some of your literary influences? Well, I mentioned Clive Barker and William Gibson are two very big influences for me. I grew up reading a lot of Clive Barker, starting with Magica, just a brilliant book. But I don't know. I like to diversify my reading a lot. See, other authors that I really enjoy is Scott Lynch. Liza Leclermore, I think, is freaking brilliant. Ashes of Onyx pulled a lot from Barker, pulled a lot from Dennis Wheatley. Clearly, there was some Chambers influences with the King in Yellow, with all the King in Yellow aspects of that. book. It very much Gibson. It starts off very Gibson-esque with Kate being a speed freak, and she's deep in the throes of addiction. I remember one of my beta readers, he didn't understand that she was an addict because she kept saying she wasn't an addict. I was like, well, she's not. She says, like, you've clearly never dealt with someone who's got an addiction, because of course she says she's not, but we all know she is. So Ashes of Onyx's influences were probably Gibson, Barker, and Wheatley would be the big three, with an incredible number of references to Chambers and Bierce's King in Yellow mythology. But I like to try different stuff. Occasionally, I think, was it Redemptor? One of the big books that influenced Redemptor was Silence of the Lambs, but nobody would probably be able to see that unless they're me, because those stories are so different. Everything about them is so different, but I know where the influences came from. Whenever I would depict certain characters or certain ways the scenes would play out, I might be inspired by a book that is nothing at all to do with what I'm writing. But I enjoy a good story, so I'll find inspiration with a lot of different authors, whether they're my genre or not. So, by the way, if you are an audiobook fan, Silence of the Lambs, the 25th anniversary edition, read by the late great Frank Muller, is fantastic. Listen, I do always recommend that one. Let's see. It's been 2000. Did you ask something already? Let's see. Other than King of Player, what's the best way to deal with someone bringing increasingly erotic lewd material to a non-erotic lewd game? To talk to them. Really, in all honesty, the best way to talk to players is just be upfront. Also, with players talking to other players actually has a more effect, in my experience, than a GM talking to a player, because players will see each other more as peers, versus the GM just getting onto them because the GM's a drag. But just simply talk to them, kind of get what's going on, what's the deal. If anybody's complained about it, you mention that, but really just talk, kind of see what's going on. Maybe they don't realize that this is becoming an increasing problem, and if you do talk and they are just gonna, like, screw you, I do what I want, that's when you can look more into stuff like getting rid of them, or some issue like that. But usually, if you just chat it out and you don't beat around the bush, you're just direct and you're not confrontational, and just talk. Usually the best way of doing it, at least for me. But some people don't respond too well to different stuff, because sometimes people are just weird. Okay. Banana question. When I play D&D, did I ever make up whole settings to set your adventure? All the time. Oh yeah. I think on one of my videos, I think Backstory, I was actually showing a lot of maps from one of the more recent worlds that I did. At least one that wasn't just crappy hand-drawn in class and as photocopy of a photocopy. It was actually one that I did once I discovered stuff like Photoshop. My Black Raven series takes place in a D&D world that we had done. And so most of the time, I think almost always, it's always been a made-up world. Very rarely did we use established settings. Occasionally we would. I had a buddy that would run us through some Dark Sun. I would try out Linkmar periodically, but most of our D&D stuff was made-up worlds. They weren't Greyhawk, or they weren't Forgotten Realms, or they weren't anything but just our world. And then we would change it up, and it would be able to accommodate whatever sort of mood we were in. Patrick Marvin, Vampire the Masquerade, ? Don't play it. It used to be very popular back in the day, but whenever my friends would try to talk me into it, it always sounded like the most boring political thing ever. Love the video games, but never got into it. Let's see. Patrick Mullen. Hi, Seth. I'm preparing to start a Traveler Intelligence / Covert Ops Themes campaign. I think it's going to have longer legs than the standard Trader campaign. Any thoughts or combat tips? Well, actually, I'm about to finish up our covert ops intelligence game right now. So the big thing that I recommend with something like that is definitely keep it limited to a smaller region, and then have your factions of bad guys. Don't just have like one bad guy. Have like factions that might be around them to either for the PCs to play against each other or to be hunting the PCs down. Um, they probably will have a cover of being traders, so they're probably still going to be doing some trading. But if you could do that where they're still doing spy stuff. One of the things that I really enjoyed adding, we were doing our game was taking place in the island subsectors, and they would actually, because there's so many different planetary loyalties, because there are all these little systems that are independent. They would always be hunting down the spy satellites that the other systems would be dropping around each other's planets. So they'd like try to steal or rewire spy satellites. Some of them were very simple. They were pretty much like just drop boxes in space, or covert ops on the planet would, shoot a message up, and then it would just sit in a satellite that's about the size of a Coke can. And then eventually another ship would come by, would ping it, get the information, drop off some orders, and fly off. So they weren't like high-tech active camera satellites. They were very passive. So the players would have to come up with ways that they would try to find these around the planets to get information, or to put new information in that might be able to screw with their enemies that were hunting them. But no, I think that's fun. That's what I've been doing for the past year now, and it's been a blast. I've enjoyed it a lot more than the trader style, because I enjoy the covert secret enemies lurking around aspects to it. So good luck with that. Um, uh, Louise ASR question: what do I think of a horror-focused cyberpunk game? Go for it. Especially, Cyberpunk has a lot of openings for stuff like body horror or elements like that. Even old Cyberpunk back in the day, there used to be the Cthulhu crossover. There used to be the vampire sort of crossover, Night's Edge, that's what it's called, which my buddy Oliver used to run us through. And actually, we ended up dropping most of the cyberpunk aspects and just pretty much played it like a vampire game or Vampire Hunters. But definitely, you can add a lot of horror aspects to the cyberpunk setting. Especially, you could have all sorts of different malware chips that turn people into killers. You could have serial killers that are using that sort of aspect to get inside of another person's body and be able to do the murders, or just the standard body horror madness of a world where you would cut off your legs just to have really cool chrome ones. So there's a lot of potential there. So have fun. Paul Crossland: if I GM D&D, which edition do I use? I don't GM D&D anymore, but I most of my experience was with first and second, and then I did 3 or 3.5. Then I did fifth for a year. I skipped fourth entirely. I'm the most comfortable probably using the first second edition one. That has by far the most years under me. But if I was to pick it up again, I would just go with fifth. I've got a list of complaints and gripes, and it's not as good as this and that aspect. But I think on the overall, it's just a much cleaner and easier system, that I would just go with fifth if I decided to pick D&D back up again. Just because I think the good outweighs the bad and whatever petty gripes I might have about it. So that's where I'd go. Ian Trainer question: how do I feel about running Pulp Cthulhu in a modern setting? Would I run it like modern Call of Cthulhu game, or set it in a more appropriate action adventure era like the 80s? Yeah, that depends. That's actually a really good question. The 80s, I guess, is a pretty good setting for that, because it's got all the benefits of modern day, but without those inconvenient cell phones and computers that can destroy your sweet plots. And I'd also, I think in Pulp Cthulhu, I mentioned that Big Trouble in Little China was a very Pulp Cthulhu film, and it really is. I would, I would probably go with modern until you mentioned that '80s thing. I might like, oh shit, that might be pretty fucking awesome, especially if we got some Cold War stuff going on. But I don't know. I could totally do it modern. I think that could be a lot of fun, especially if you have a lot more of the pulp talents dealing with computers. That way, you could have your badass hacker making weird science devices using cell phones and stuff. That could be pretty awesome. And I think that we still have enough stuff going on in the world that we don't exactly have the Cold War anymore, but you can still have enemies if you want to do a political intrigue aspect to it. But I don't know. I think it sounds freaking awesome either way you do it. So if that's what you're doing, good luck. Let's see. Ah, Jarl with Two Starving Knolls. Seth, keep up the good work. Oh, I'm glad. So Two Starving Knolls recently did a Kickstarter that looks freaking awesome. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know. It's like Edge of Tomorrow meets The Thing. I don't really know. I haven't read it yet. It hasn't come out. But they did Pax Cthulhiana, and I was really, really impressed with Pax Cthulhiana. So I'm looking forward to seeing what their next thing is. And Max Ryder. Hey, man. Let's see. I'm doing a modern Pulp Cthulhu game based on Evil Dead. Fuck yes. Have fun, man. Have a lot of fun with that. Which, oh god, yeah, especially if you do like Ash versus the Evil Dead. I think that's a good example of what a pulp game should be like. Ash is a perfect example of what most of our player characters end up being like. Tell the shade. Oh, this one looks good. Cyberpunk 2020. Have you ever struggled with the game's lethality? With that, another question. Have you ever tackled 2020 spinoff Cyber Generation? Never tried Cyber Generation. Just it never called to me. I never really read much in it. I just a buddy told me some about it, and I was like, Cyberpunk's lethality. It's a curve. The first game when a player is getting used to that is pretty eye-opening. We ended up going with the Interlock Unlimited game mechanics after a couple of years of playing Cyberpunk 2020, and I preferred most of the hacks. We used almost all of Interlock Unlimited. There's a few things we didn't because it's just this mass collection of house rules, but the players ended up learning to play a lot smarter. And because it was very much like you get cover, you do this, you come up with anything you can do to make yourself harder to hit instead of just getting more and more armor. Make it where you don't need the armor if they can't hit you. But your players have to start thinking tactically. And if your players are not the type that will ever approach tactical, like what's the best way through this combat, they're very often going to be the ones that keep finding themselves making new characters. Once again, with that one, I mentioned earlier, probably before you showed up, hold on, escalation. So with Cyberpunk, we usually started off pretty light. You've got a little armor t-shirt, you have a knife, maybe one of the bad guys has a pistol. And as you start getting more and more used to it, then all of a sudden, more of the bad guys have pistols. More of the bad guys might have a martial arts. Armor starts going up. Now we're going to introduce a submachine gun or an auto pistols, or now we're going to have melee, but they've got cyber arms. And it would be a gradual working up because as they're getting used to it, and then I'm getting used to it as well. And then, but if the player ran out, it's like first thing I'm going to do is get an auto shotgun and this super duper armor. It's like, okay, then we would have to, I'd have to address that with, I need an opponent that can physically hit you. So now all of a sudden it's becoming a lot more lethal than what the natural progression would be. So definitely talk to your players about it, but I usually like to step it up a little bit. If you make your opponents a little bit too weak, you can always have more bad guys show up. And Cyberpunk is, it's super duper lethal, and healing takes a long time. So a few small combats should be able to teach them what to expect before you throw in something super duper powerful at them. That way they can at least understand that yes, getting hit once with a 9mm in that game will possibly ruin your day, and get them used to the idea of how to handle that before you suddenly have a guy pull out 2 Uzis and dump 60 rounds of 9mm at them and around, because that'll absolutely destroy their day. So just step it up very slowly, and that's what we did, and we had a lot of fun. But it did take a few characters on that learning curve before we really had it down. And once again, I really do recommend a lot of the Interlock Unlimited mods, especially with like stepped down explosive damage. One of the things that always bothered me with Cyberpunk explosives was it's like full damage up to the end of the range. So like if you're, if an explosion goes off and you stay like 3 feet in front of yourself, 1 meter ahead, you get the full brunt of the explosion. But if you're 3 feet back, you get none of it. And if you're in it, whether you're next to the explosion or all the way at the edge, it's the same. So Cyberpunk Interlock Unlimited would actually step it down. The further you were from the core explosion, actually went all the way down until it was 0. A lot of little things like that really helped us out, and it was a lot of fun. Let's see. Francisco Morales, well, my thought on the Gumshoe system, like Trail of Cthulhu, Fall of Delta Green. I haven't played them. Just never really, I just haven't picked them up to look at them, just because we were enjoying Call of Cthulhu. I don't really look at a lot of other stuff if I'm happy with what I have. If I feel like there's something that I need, I will start looking out there for what's going on. I absolutely love 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, so it has never given me the need to really have to look elsewhere. I've looked through regular Delta Green, and I played their quick start. I played a little bit with Bud from Bud's RPG Review. He ran me and a few others, including Shane Ivey. He was really nervous about running Shane Ivey through the game that Shane designed. But I enjoy that system. But it's fun. The only things I know with Trail of Cthulhu, that's the one where you the investigation, there is no rolling defined clues. It's basically you get the clues, and then it's up to the players to piece them together. But the actual discovering of the clues is pretty much given. I like that. I think that is a good way to approach a lot of mystery games, whether it's that system or not. I really did enjoy that, but I never really looked that much deeper because I just never felt like I needed something that compelled me to, when I was really happy with Call of Cthulhu. So, sorry, I don't have more insight than that. Ooh, where are we going here? Scott Pickett question. I love your Traveler series. Wondering, do I use the random world building in the books? Really, we're playing in the Imperium setting, so I haven't had to use much world building. I did it just to try it out, and it was pretty cool. I actually think the system for making random worlds in that edition of Traveler, I don't know how it was in the previous editions, is actually incredibly good. At first, I was worried that it would be too many random factors on a planet, but I like the way they would influence each other. So I think that's pretty cool. I did make my own test sector once. I originally thought about the idea of making a video of showing that, but it ended up being really long and really kind of boring to even make. I think watching it would even be more boring, so I didn't really dive too much into that. But I think it's cool. I just don't use it. We're currently playing in the Great Reft and enjoying that, so I haven't had to make up my own system and all the worlds for our own game. But it's got a great toolbox to do it. Let's see. Green DM question. How often do I put players in a situation that I don't have a solution? For example, the use that is immune to non-magical damage in an anti-magic zone. I think most of the time I don't have like a set solution. I don't. If you come up with a set solution, if there's one way to do it, you are guaranteed goddamn teeth they will not come up with that. If you kind of go in with, I don't know how they're going to do this, they will come up with something brilliant. But I will usually come up with it before the game. I will kind of conceptualize a few, like, they might do it that way, they might do it that. But I don't really ever have a set way. And if there is a puzzle that they have to do and there is a set way to do it, I'm actually more inclined to tell them this is the set way to do it. Your job is to figure out how to do it the set way. But such as here's all the variables involved. Go for it. I don't really have much of a way they're supposed to do it. When I was newer, I would, and that didn't work out. That ended up becoming, I don't know, very, very railroady. And I think my players enjoy the fact that I honestly have no clue how they're supposed to do it, because that takes the pressure off of them of trying to psychoanalyze what it was that I have in mind as the solution to it. And it took them a few years to break that habit, because my players have been with me, two of them have been with me for 21 years. So they had to learn when I made the transition. But most of my encounters, I don't know exactly how they're going to get through it. And if there is a set way, I tell them up front, there is this, and that should be able to do it. But now it's your job to figure out how to get those parts to work together. But I don't ever have the whole thing mapped out. And I do that intentionally because I like to be surprised. And they're always going to come up with something different than I did. And if they have to come up with that, they never will, period. It's just, they know what I want, and they're deep down psychologically, their brains won't tell them that idea. They'll come up with something haywire. Manfred Connor, question: how do I avoid feeling that there is not enough original thought in the universe when developing content for your games? And do you run more of your own content or more modules? Most of my gaming career, I have made up my own content primarily. Past few years, I've mostly done modules, but so I would have to do exclusive modules for like the next 10 years to even make it 50-50. I don't worry about it. It's my game. I love ripping off stuff. I love having all sorts of odes to different movies and stuff. I prefer not to make them easily predictable to the player. So I usually go for like old Harryhausen flicks that they might not be familiar with, or different stories that I've read that they're not familiar with. But I don't run away from the cliches. I mean, I'm doing it for me and my buddies. We enjoy that, and that's what we're going to do. So I don't really have a feeling if I must give them some completely original thing. I just rather make it a fun game, and sometimes we just really do like a lot of just stealing from this and stealing from that. So it's nothing I worry about. If I was making it to sell it, absolutely I would worry about that, because I'm trying to sell it. But if it's for my game with me and my friends, don't really worry about it. And even with modules, and I've talked about with modules, make it your own. I will change the beginnings of them. I will change certain characters. I will do certain stuff to kind of weave it into whatever story it is, or to give them a better motivation than what the module gave them, because the module had no idea what type of characters I would have, and whatever they gave me as the hook doesn't really work with the group that I have. Or I'll swap out a bad guy to be somebody else. But I will make it my own, but I don't feel obligated to make it my own for my own sake. I'll make it my own if I can make it better, but that's it. Yeah. Oh, hell, did I just see CT Phipps and I scroll right past him? Scott Brown, man. Yeah, CT Phipps, if anybody has ever read his Supervillainy series, old friend of mine. We used to be with the same publisher. Well, we're still with the same publisher, just a different one, but we met back when we were at the dark days of Ragnarok. So I never heard of Cyber Generation. Never heard of that. Exactly. Cyber Generation was kind of a spin-off of Cyberpunk 2020 that was weird. I never get into it. It just didn't feel right. 2020 was my big love. When will I review of Have I Played The Last Flight of the Memorial for Traveler? I haven't played it, so until I do, I won't review it. I've got a ton of adventures we have run that I will eventually be reviewing, but trying to think, that was, I think I've read that one, but it just didn't really fit in what we were doing. A lot of games I just don't run if they just don't fit into whatever our campaign is. It's not that it's bad. It's just like, it doesn't really fit for what we're doing, maybe later. So I think 90% sure I have at least skimmed that one, but it just didn't fit. So didn't keep going. Lick-toed Gobo. Nice. Question: do I set my Cthulhu and Conan adventures in the same universe, but simply millennia apart? Nah, they're different universes to me. I don't have to make it in the same universal timeline or anything. So it's just different game, different universe, and we go from there. We might make references because we can always have little cameos and stuff, but it's always different universes for me. Next, right, you're adapting Sinister Secret Saltmarsh to Down Darker Trails. That is a fantastic, easily adaptable adventure. I have ripped that off in multiple systems, including Call of Cthulhu. So just damn good. I think it's because it's very simple and you can just kind of put it in a lot of different locations. Okay, ST Explore question. Do I have any thoughts, advice in the process of wrapping up a longer running game? Like a longer running campaign, like that takes place over some time. If you're doing a campaign story, like some big saga, it's usually a lot easier as you're getting closer to the finale of it that you can work up to. If you're doing an episodic sort of thing where they haven't been working towards some major story that they're leading up to, that can be a little bit harder. I will usually have some big epic story that we suddenly kind of drop in, where maybe all these unrelated things before certain pieces from several of them come together and we've got a big mission to do. But I usually want a finale. I have had it where they just kind of ended, and that never felt worthy of the amount of time that we had spent playing those characters of that world. So I usually try to lead up to some ending, and I want them to know we're leading up to an ending. So my players are well aware before we get there that we're working towards the end. So they're feeling that excitement too. If I'm laying down some groundwork of excitement, they know that it's going to be exciting. Ryan Stevens, love my channel. Playing Pulp Cthulhu because of it. I'm going to be running Traveler in the future. Good luck. Pulp Cthulhu was so much fun for us. I love Call of Cthulhu, but I prefer putting the Pulp mod on it. Even if we're running regular Call of Cthulhu style adventures, most of them work better for us if they're Pulp. A few of them work better if they're still classic old Call of Cthulhu, but my group, they like to occasionally just punch the bad guy in the face. So love that system. Traveler, fun game. Hope you have fun with it. Greg Pine, have I played Cyberpunk 2077 yet? What do you think about it? I'm currently playing it. I actually started it last Sunday, and so I don't know how many hours into it I am. Having a lot of fun. I figured I was wait long enough for the bugs to get worked out, the initial bugs, and man, was I right on that. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. I love to be able to get to see Night City, which is a place I've imagined for so many years. I'd love to be able to actually physically see that. I have enjoyed the flashback sequences to where we get to go through the events from some of the stories like Never Fade Away, and I get to see Alt, and I get to see some of these characters and places from 2020. But I'm enjoying it. It's like I very rarely play video games. The writing or the channel or different stuff usually are my big time sinks. So I finally was able to kind of write in, I need to play this game, especially since we do want to get to 27 or Cyberpunk Red soon. And I at least want to be kind of current on what a lot of my players are going to be doing, because a lot of my players are playing or have played 2077. So I at least want to be kind of current on whatever their slang was or what they were imagining or different ways. I loved interacting with the Voodoo Boys. Man, stuff that I'm probably going to use in a tabletop game from 2077 so far, the Voodoo Boys. Really, really like the way they did that. But I'm enjoying it. Let's see. I played Stygian Reign of the Old Ones. No, I haven't played it. In honesty, if you've never seen me review it, chances are I haven't played it, or I haven't played enough of it, or not enough to really have a decent answer. For Thor, um, man, sometimes like I look down, I see these comments, but I can tell they're conversations. You guys are having a chat, so it's like I just see this random sentence like, MCDM has a similar solution. I don't know what that's in reference to, but okay, cool. Hopefully it was something smart that I said that at least they agree with. Nagle bites. Hey man, love your videos. How do I feel about the Feng Shui system? Love the hell out of it. I haven't played it. I'm not familiar with it, so I don't have an opinion about one way or the other. Um, ooh, come on, man. It always knows exactly which one I'm looking at. Um, Azur Abin, question. From your heist video, do I draw out the heist maps, or do I have it somewhat flexible to shift obstacles around? Having issue dropping out a corpo map, I like the scale to reality correct feeling. Okay, that depends. I have done both. I have had very, very elaborate maps for it, and then I've also done very loose. And the one that I've had the most success with is um, sort of a combination. Like I've got very detailed like map of like the overhead shot of the place. You know, the building is here, the gate is here, parking garage is here, guard shack is there. That's that sort of thing. But as far as the interiors of what a lot of those buildings look like, not really. I'll know where the entrances are, and I will know how like a floor in a building looks. And I will know certain things that might stretch through it, like an elevator shaft or where the main stairs are. But as far as every detail around the building, there's still a lot of loose. And a lot of that is because the players will come up with something that they want to ask about that I like, but I never considered, such as air shafts or something like that. So I do leave a lot of the fine details on a lot of those parts loose. That way I can adapt to whatever it is they're wanting to do, because it just I didn't consider that as being a potential opening. So I will have but in like the main room, the vault or the lair or something, that part will be very highly detailed. But everything around it starts in just different shades of gray with a couple concrete things like this is where the elevator is. You know, this is where the walls are. This is where the entrance to the building itself. So I'll have that, but I don't get into detail and everything. I have done it before, and one of the other reasons I stopped is you put all this time getting really detailed into it to be able to take all the different directions they might approach it, and they ended up approaching it from, just one way or one you might not have thought of, and you put all this work into all this other stuff. So I just kind of limit it to what I'd like. I know I need this, and it's enough that I can paint from, but I don't really get into a lot of the minor details. The most recent heist we did, it was for a traveler, and they were actually doing a jailbreak out of a prison. Yeah, so I did have a map for like overhead. This is what the prison looks like from the sky. And I had a couple maps of like cell blocks, but they were like the master two cell blocks. It was a lot more than that. And I figured like this I will want detailed for them, and this I'll want detailed for them, and everything else after that I'll we'll wing that part, because I know where all the entrances are. I know where everything is in relationship to each other, but I don't need to know where every single hallway is in this building over here, in the compound, because we probably won't need it. And when we do, I can adapt. But I know I will need this part highly detailed. I'll do it, but I still have a little bit of wiggle room in case they want to ask about something I'd never considered before. So gray zone combo. A lot of it depends on the heist. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Francois, am I aware of the King Arthur Pendragon RPG created by Greg Stafford? Great game, unique system. Um, I am aware of it. I never played it. I never really got too much into the Arthurian mythologies. Loved the movie Excalibur growing up, but I never really got into the passionate mythology love of King Arthur. So it just never really called to me. I heard a lot of great stuff about it, but there was a lot of talk about that in Designers and Dragons, which is books about the history of the industry. And I talked about a lot of the acclaim that that game got, but just never called to me. Okay, Fate has fallen 137. Question: I've used your suggestion when I ran the Haunting Modern Day as a ghost hunting show. It weren't great. Fuck yes, I'm glad it did. I'm happy somebody did it and that it worked because I love that. I'm going to do that for the Westchester House. Do I have any suggestions for the Westchester House? Um, Westchester would be tricky. Well, it depends if you're doing it like the actual Winchester House, which it's clearly based on. Um, that one, that's such a good game. I really love that adventure, mostly because it does kind of defy a lot of expectations that players come in with. But I would probably with something like the Westchester House. I would still do the aspect that it is non-supernatural. That's also when you can't map it. It's just so freaking weird. One though that you might want to consider, and I've recently been reading it. I've been considering it to run. Don't know if I will. Is Forget Me Not, and where they actually are ghost hunters in that one. So that is a modern day ghost hunter one. So if you already have a group that's doing it, you could probably write that in very easily into Forget Me Not. But if you are going to be looking at doing the Westchester House, if you go to the Winchester House website, they actually have a virtual tour of the place, and you can do a little virtual tour of the Winchester Mystery Mansion. So you can draw a lot of inspiration for the fictitious Westchester House by watching the little tour of the real Winchester Mansion, because that place is freaking weird. And it can give you a lot of just cool little tidbits that you can drop in and give to your players. But good luck with that. What did I think about the Star Trek Adventures game that I played for ModCon? It was fine. So I with ModCon back in December, I got to play in a game of Star Trek that had Guy from How to Be a Great GM was GMing that, and Janet from World Anvil was there, and we had fun. It was only a 2-hour demo game, so I never really got to like deep into the game, because there was also like the revision. We could stop and we could like kind of explain certain things to the audience. So it didn't have the full immersion that like a real game would be if we all got together. We just played that game. And man, they know Star Trek so much better than me. I felt so underprepared in just world lore terminology stuff, because they would start throwing out terminology like so fast. So I'm like, oh my god, this is, how the hell are you doing that? But they have a different level of a fandom that I have never even gotten close to. Especially Guy, that dude could do a great freaking Klingon. I had fun just because I enjoyed playing with them. I don't really have much opinion whatsoever of the Star Trek system outside of my normal kind of impressions and kind of towards the 2D20 system as a whole. It is a few differences from Conan, because they at least adapted certain aspects of the system to work better with the setting world, and I do like that, but I don't really have much of an opinion of it. I've got the rule book. ModCon or Modifius was very kind enough to send me a copy of the rule book. Unfortunately, I didn't have it during the thing. I had a PDF, but whenever periodically on that thing, everyone would hold up their rule book because they're doing giveaways, because they were mailing it here from England in December, and between pandemic and Christmas stuff. I didn't get that book till like well after the convention, and they sent it to me well before ModCon started. It's just the mail system devoured it for like a month and a half or something. So I've flipped through it. It looks neat, but it's nothing that really just calls to me, especially since right now we are playing sci-fi with Traveler, space stuff. It would require something amazing for me to like put down one space opera game to go to another, especially when I'm perfectly happy with the one that I'm on. So no real thoughts. I had fun playing with them, but also because getting to play with Guy was a treat for me. Carson Smith question: what's Dweeble's real name? The thing is, I know what his real name is, but if I told you, it would ruin the fun. It's kind of like when you're watching a good show and there's the will they or won't they plot. The attractive people that fight crime together, and somewhere around like season 4 they suddenly hook up, and the will they won't they goes away because they did, and it's like then the show started sucking. I think of Dweeble's name kind of like that. It's kind of like Castle. It's just gonna lose a lot of its fun once you know the name. So I might as well keep it that way. Have I tried Fallout? No, really, you guys. If you want to ask me about a game that I've never reviewed, if I haven't reviewed it, I probably haven't played it. So, any thoughts on Red Dwarf elements and references to a Traveler game? Fuck yeah, do it. Hell yes. Yeah, I think you should always put little references, and especially something goofy like Red Dwarf. I mean, you want to kind of limit it if you want to keep the game mostly serious, but if you just have little jabs every now and then, yeah, absolutely put it in there. Even if you are having a serious game, have some little comic relief moments. If you do them all the time, it's going to be difficult to keep the game serious. But it was little regular jokes or references to Red Dwarf or anything else. Hell yeah, do it. We play it to have fun, and that stuff's fun. Will I be returning to Call of Cthulhu? Will I be playing Children of Fear? Yes, I will be returning to Call of Cthulhu. I've never fully left it, and I don't know about Children of Fear. I don't know if I'll ever do that one. Right now, I'm looking at a couple modern day things. I'm kind of waffling on a few. There is from Peterson's Abomination, Panacea, I think. That's one that I'm considering running in the next couple months. And Forget Me Not, I was mentioning that one earlier because I was reading that to consider for the next couple months. Highway of Blood, I'm not sure. A lot of that one depends on how my players will take it. That one, I think I like reading it a lot more than I might like running it. So I'll kind of have to go through it. So those are the big ones I'm looking at. It's more modern day for a bit with Call of Cthulhu. But don't no, there's a lot out there. A lot of people always ask, like, when am I going to do that one? It's like, there's like 500 adventures. I can't get to all of them. Okay. Question: am I going to review Overarms, the tabletop RPG heavily based on JoJo and Persona? I don't know what any of that stuff is, so no. I don't know anything about any of that. Any plans for the trio to have another full episode on their own? From Danica Inc. Yes, I actually have. I've had a gang video that I've been planning for a while. The problem is, so with gang videos, with the kind of the precedent that I enjoyed working with the Kirk versus Picard, was I had two things going on at once. I had the completely random conversation that was going on. That was the debate over who was the best captain. And then I had what was going on around the table as the secondary storyline. And I've got a really fun one that I've been considering, and it's the conversation that they're having. I haven't come up with a really good what's going on around the table, so I might just have to do one that's less about what's going on around the table and more about the conversation. So I do have at least one more that's mostly planned out. The conversation's pretty much written, but as far as the background movement of what the players are actually doing on the table, that's the only thing holding that one up. The problem is the game videos are like just hell to shoot because I'm all of them, so I have to very meticulously script those out because I have to put on one character's outfit and then I have to do all of the conversation and movements in relation to what everybody else is doing, and then I have to have so many shots of the table or the board as like the B-roll so you can look down at the thing. Those are very, very complicated and difficult to do, even when they're only like 8-9 minutes. So it's very easy for me to convince myself to work on something else because I know when I decide like, okay, I'm ready to do that next gang video, it's like this is about to own me for the next 8-9 days just to write it, get everything ready for it. And it's like, oh, maybe it'll just feel more fun to do this scenario review instead. So that's why there's such a big gap between them. Is I procrastinate because they're just a lot of work. But then when I'm done, I'm always like, oh, that was so great. I wish I had done that like 6 months ago when I thought about it. So, but yes, to answer the question, there will be more. Okay. Pedro, have I checked out Traveler 5th edition? What I think of it? I haven't checked it out. Mongoose sent me all the Traveler stuff, just kind of like, it was like an odd thing. They said, like, if we send this to you, will you look at it? And I said, well, I'll make it no promises. I have to read it to see if I like it. And Matt Strange was like, I'm willing to take that risk. And so they sent it to me, and that was the only time I had ever actually read Traveler. I just heard about it. So I haven't looked into T5 just because I already have all the rule books for Mongoose. And then I've added to that collection. So I already made that the financial commitment as well. So there's no need to look into the other stuff unless I feel there's something missing. And I don't. I was very happy with Mongoose. Oh, question. The RuneQuest Grand Campaign was announced. Yes, no. What are your thoughts? Cool. I don't really care for RuneQuest. It's nothing against RuneQuest. It's just the setting, that the kind of the fantasy swords and horses type of fantasy is not really what gets me excited. I spent years where that was what got me excited, so it just doesn't. I've got so many other stuff I want to do. So, yeah, I hope it's great. I hope everybody enjoys it. Just it's not going to be my big jam. Do you have any plans to pick up Forbidden Lands by Free League? Probably not. Uh, it's OSR. Just don't know much about it. And trying to gild me with money for Dweeble's his real name. I cannot be bought. You will have to meet me in person at a con and get a few drinks in me, and then I might tell you, but I also might lie. So I can't even be trusted there. So I'm a continual source of inspiration. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'm happy you've been enjoying it. Ben Gorman, what is my favorite book that I have written? Ooh, good question, Ben. Let's see. That actually has a few layers to it. Hold on. Dameron, that was my debut, so I'm always going to love Dameron off the simple fact that was the first book that I wrote and had a publisher say I want it and go through that, and I had to break out on the scene as a novelist. That book took like 2 years to write or something, so it will always be a favorite in that regard. The next one, Hanassier. Actually, I think Hanassier is my favorite of the novels that I've written. I enjoy that one the most, just as enjoyability, but it doesn't have the nice little triumph that Dameron got of being the first. So I would say Hanassier is my favorite book that I wrote. And then craft-wise, the best book that I wrote, just if you're looking at writing craft, would be Ashes of Onyx, and that's just because Ashes of Onyx was the most recent. And I think every book or every novel that I've written, I have gotten a lot better in my craft than I was for the one before it. So Ashes, just come out a year ago, and being a lot newer, adds the benefit of all the stuff that I learned writing all the books before it. So I think that's the best craft-wise, but Hanassier is probably my favorite. So good question. Daniel Ladson, any more tabletop war stories coming soon to the channel? I don't know about soon. I've got several more that I'd like to do, but it kind of depends. Tabletop war stories are you have to come up with a good one that is good to do in that format. Where a lot of our big jokes and our funny ones that we laugh about, I don't think would really translate well in a video as being that enjoyable to other people. So I always have to come up with one that I think would be good for the video format of kind of showing what all happened. But the next one I'm considering, I've got two that I've been considering. One of them is over, and it's not as punch funny as the others. It is mostly about two epic characters that we had, where I had two players that are not the best role players, but they ended up making the dynamic duo of a pair of epic characters together, and the absolute joy we had when the two least role-playing people in the room suddenly became the two most, as long as their two characters were interacting with each other. So I might do that one. That would just be titled The Swansons. And then I actually have been also thinking about it'd be a little bit shorter. It would be a sequel to The Bonesaw. It was another incident that happened with The Bonesaw. So I'm not sure. Depends on which one. I don't know. The Bonesaw might only be like 2 minutes because most of the setup about who the Bonesaw is was already covered. And but it's just one of the other big things we always laughed about with that stupid sword. I've ever played Kobolds Ate My Baby. No. See, you get to play Kobold, have to steal a human baby for the Kobold King. I love that idea right there. Never played it. I remember there used to be an old, I want to say it was second edition D&D thing where you played the monsters and the heroes were all the NPCs. So like you made your goblins and you had to make the dungeon, and then you I think the next adventure was like your little bit higher level monster, and you made the dungeon and the heroes are higher level, and so the GM played the heroes, you played the monsters, and I always thought that was really cool. Never tried it, but I always loved the idea of it. Oh, Atomic Woodpecker on one. Orient Express, do you dare? Do you wish to read the 100-page tomb? Well, I mean, I've got it right. I don't know if you can see it. It's right there. So I've got it. Though when I got it, I didn't get the PDF because my wife bought it for me for Christmas, and she didn't know that she could get the PDF from Chaosium. So I'll have to get the PDF for it still. But I've got it, and I'll probably be running it once we've ridden on the Orient Express. That will probably become a priority of ours. So sometime in 2023, we'll probably start playing it. So that's how far in advance I'm thinking of campaigns. So eventually, one day. And wow, we are 4:53. We could probably start wrapping this bad boy up. I can get up and stretch my legs. And oh, nice little Bonesaw peanut head going back and forth there. 2023, the time in the future. Yes. Well, because I'm doing, I mentioned earlier, doing Eldritch Con November 2022. And for that one, we're going to ride the Orient Express from Paris to Bucharest. So once I've been on the Orient Express, I want to run it. but I'll at least so one of the things I want to do when we do that is I'm probably going to be walking around with the camera making backplate photos just for Jack, because in a lot of my videos, I'll spend an incredible amount of time just trying to find a good appropriate backplate to be behind Jack, which is sucks because most of the time my body is covering the best part of the picture that's behind me. But a lot of times it's like I need a picture of a train car from head, like you're standing, but I don't want people in it. I don't want like these people that are frozen in time. So I like to have an empty background as much as possible when I'm doing Jack scenes. So if I'm going to be on the Orient Express, if I could find ever moments where I've got a good like backdrop for a Jack scene, I'm just like snap a few pictures and start turning those into my backplates for it. So I will have an agenda while I'm on that train to at least get some good background shots for Jack. That way it's a lot easier than trying to hunt the internet for 2 days trying to find pictures that almost work but don't quite. Let's see. Ooh, there was a good one. It went away. Man, I really hate this chat thing. See, Manfred Connor. What kind of games do I like best? D20, 2x D20, 3x D6 percentiles, to blah, blah, blah. I like the percentile system probably best. Like as far as I like the skill-based mechanics of the BRP system, but it doesn't work best for everything. I don't really believe that there is a true universal system that can do everything as good as everything else. I think there are ones that are better overall than others, but I don't think anything is absolutely perfect all the time. So I think a game that's designed to be using like D20 will probably best used if you use D20. But I think if I was just going to play general stuff, the percentile system that Call of Cthulhu or the BRP system uses, that's my favorite. I think it's just very, very simple, and I like it a lot. So. Mm-hmm. Euclatius? As a man who's been published, do you have any habits for productivity, tips for others who wish to write? Maybe. Well, I mentioned earlier in this one, probably before you showed up, because it was like 2 hours ago, man. Set yourself a regular, achievable deadline. When I first started writing a novel, I did a chapter a month. It could be any length chapter you want, but set a deadline that is easy to achieve in the worst of times. And that way, when it's the best of times, you can always beat what your deadline is, but come up with some sort of easily to achieve goal that you have. For me, it was monthly, that you can stick to, and that's it. But make it reasonable, because even though right now you might have all the time in the world to write, in 6 months you might not. So make it where when times are bad, you think you could still achieve that, and then just stick to it, like militantly, like you do have a boss breathing down your neck for it. And that's the only way I've been able to do it. But everybody's different. Everybody's got a different trick that they need to kind of trick their brain into like continuing to motivate them. Will I be doing a how-to for Cyberpunk 2020 like I did for Call of Cthulhu? No. A couple reasons. Like one of them, there's a newer edition of Cyberpunk out. So I wouldn't go back and do a 9-month commitment of a how-to on a game that's not even the current edition of the game. Call of Cthulhu, it was the current edition. Traveler was the current edition. Will I do that for Cyberpunk? I don't know. A game really has to blow me away to commit almost a year of making review videos. It has to have enough to it that it requires that much time. Some games don't require a huge series just to do a how-to series for it, just because they don't require it. With travel, you get space combat and trade and all the stuff going into making a character that does require that many videos to do an in-depth how-to. But it just depends if I love the system that much. There's just I did. People have been asking when I'm going to do a how-to on Conan. It's like, well, if you watch my video of Conan, you'll know why I won't do a year-long commitment to making a series on how to play it, because it didn't blow me away. It just felt weird. So I don't know. Maybe I might do one for Cyberpunk Red. I might not. I have to play it first. Okay, I think we're getting pretty close to time, he says once again. Okay, let's see. Nosmo90. You think you declare turns backwards in initiative order, then do turns in initiative order. Initiative system can be unfair for low initiative players. Tried introducing it to the group and they had concerns. Okay, well, once you with tips like that, it depends on the group, depends on the campaign, depends on the system. So don't ever think any of that stuff is just universal across every system or every even campaign. But if you've got a character, it's unfair to the low initiative ones. It's actually it's an old gag that they used to do in old war games. I think old BattleTech is the first time I ever saw reverse initiative order. I think they used to do that in MechWarrior as well. I don't see that as being unfair for low initiative characters because they are the low initiative characters. It's one of the things that's always been kind of unfair to high initiative characters, that they're the last to find out what everybody's going to be doing in the room. The other thing you can do is you don't necessarily have to give specifics. Depending on the game, there might be roles involved to require their characters to have knowledge of what the other ones are doing, like read intention or be able to have tactics. I think I mentioned in that one spells, like my wizard's going to cast an area of effect spell, but if your character wants to know what spell it is, you have to make this roll so you can counteract it. I'd recommend just try it. See if it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. If it does work, then great. Or maybe you can find an in between. My players really enjoyed it, but we used it a lot more effectively in Cyberpunk. We used it a lot more effectively in certain types of D&D. I'd say it didn't really work that well in fantasy. That it worked better in old D&D. It did not work well for us when we tried it in fifth. I don't know why, but it just didn't. I think it's because there were so many different aspects to combat with tax of opportunity and all that stuff that just aren't in the old editions. But it just didn't work as smoothly when we tried it. So just see, and good luck. If it doesn't work, that's fine. But give it a shot. A lot of the times, things like that I've often found that work more to the player's advantage, because as the GM, unless I've got some super smart opponent, the dumb opponent is not going to be able to use much of the knowledge of what the other characters are going to do. The big thing that the reverse initiative order does is it allows them to help kind of come up with strategies as far as, I want to cut this person off before they shoot me. And usually player characters end up having the higher initiatives than the non-player characters do in most games, just because the player characters are better than their opponents. So just give it a shot. Games. When it comes to using stories from cultural legends for homebrew, do you use them without being offensive or doing cultural appropriation? If I am doing it with my group and my homebrew, my goal is to not offend my players. But after that, they're my audience. I just want to give them a good game, so I don't really concern myself with that, because that's just for me and my friends. So it's not a concern, unless it is something that I think would bother the people that I'm playing with. They're the only people that matter. Paul, what board games do I like to play? I'm not a huge board game guy. Actually, I don't mind board games. My wife isn't a big board game person, so I never get much of a chance to do board games because she doesn't get excited about them. So most of the time, whenever our friends are doing it, they're like, what to do is a couple things. She's not excited, so then we never play it. So I never play board games. Magic Man. Tell you what, I'm going to give this 5 more minutes. I want to know if I want to do a cult review / overview. My God, I might do a review for cult eventually once I've got a lot more playtime with it. But overviews, man, I think we get people spoiled thinking that's like the normal. I've reviewed so many systems. I'm only doing overviews for two. Um, and that's actually a super simple system. Powered by the Apocalypse is like fast to learn. The bulk of the cult book is world lore, and in none of my overviews do I go into world lore. I just go over the game mechanics. Cult's really simple as far as game mechanics go. And if people that are familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse should mostly be familiar with that. It is their own, breed of it because they've had to make a few changes to make it more appropriate for that game. But gross bulk of the cult rulebook is just world lore, which I love. I love the world lore for it. But I would never dedicate videos just going over the world lore on that. So, but eventually I would like to review it. That is a game that is so not for everybody, but it was fun. See, Scarmiglione. Yeah, I'm so bad at names. Do you have any tips for game prep for the GM on a salary, i.e., the busy DM? Is the busy DM like a blog or something? I don't know. I mean, on a salary, like I could give you tips on a budget, but and I don't know. I'm not really quite sure what the question is. Uh, Sorry, I think that's probably a reference to some blog. Mhm. Isn't it Lazy DM? I don't know. I've never read Lazy DM, or I might have read one thing by him. I occasionally get asked about Lazy DM stuff. I don't know what that is. Uh, Question: Have I ever played Massive Nyarlathotep? I have played the first chapter of the new Mass. Scott Dorward ran um, the How We Roll podcast group through it, and then we had Murph from Miskatonic University podcast was on it, and we played that, and it took us a course of like a year because our schedules were always um, going sideways. I think at the very beginning we were about to start, and then Joe, had a baby. Well, his wife had a baby, so it's like then it got put off, and then all this other stuff happened. So we did the first chapter, and that was it. But I've never read or anything else for the remainder of Mass, so I don't really know too much more about it other than the Peru chapter, which we did have a lot of fun with. But we went completely sideways and weird. I don't think it is that long for most people. Um, and, Damage tech output, melee versus auto guns. Should Blade 4 get more attacks versus Blade 0? So it's a question about Traveler. How do I address the balance issue of combat? Particular damage attack output of melee versus auto guns. Should Blade 4 get more attacks versus Blade 0? That's up to you. If you want to start having an increased attacks per level on it because you've hit a certain level or you've hit a certain uh, speed or proficiency or whatnot, well, check it out. But I would announce that to your players earlier on than necessarily before they can reach a blade level that high. Give them something to work toward. But I don't see too much of a problem. However, automatic weapons are better than swords. That is why the army does not use swords. So if you're going to do that, just keep in mind that is because you're wanting to make it more pulpy. If another option would be a form of augment, a technology that allows a person to have more blade attacks or more melee attacks in a round. If you want to do that way, But if you want to come up with a way to give it more melee or blade or whatnot attacks, I say go for it. But just the other way I put it, whenever the players ask for stuff like that, is you do understand the bad guys will have that too. And sometimes they will ask for like, hey, if I could have as many attacks as my level of blade, it's like, okay, I think that's a little high, because if we throw you in a situation, you do understand that all the bad guys will have that exact same benefit as you, and that will quickly ruin your day. So whatever you do, make sure you think about how that will affect the opponents versus just the PCs, which is why you might want to do it as an augment, or level 4. That's pretty high. Most NPCs are not going to have level 4, so maybe that's a good starting point. Or maybe they get a second one once they get to second or fourth if you do every other one. But figure it out. I'm not opposed to it, but I still see it as blades are weaker than guns. That's why we use firearms now. And I tell you what, let's get one more question in, and then I am going to call it a day on this, because I think we're going to be going for like a lot of 2 hours now, and hopefully I've missed too many of the good questions. I know I've missed like hundreds of questions here. Let's see. Do you think the Alien RPG is a bit limited? It's like feeling it works. Man, Manfred, we mentioned this one earlier. You're late to the show 2 hours ago at the beginning. Yeah, I think my fear of the Alien RPG is that it could become a bit stagnant for a long-running campaign, because it's aliens, which for one-shots I think it is freaking great. I would have to see it effectively used as a campaign before I could really be sold on how well it could work as a long-term campaign. Let's see. Encounters. Okay, I'm trying to understand this question, but this one looks good. Question from the N-Bomb. How do you tackle a player that proclaims that their character would give in social encounters, i.e., they ignore the dice since their character would never yield? I'd have to have some example of what exactly that means. It's vague enough that I'm not entirely sure what you're referring to. Now, when it comes to social encounters in games, I might one day do a video on this. The problem is there's just so many different mechanics for different systems that I just you almost have to make it system specific. But overall, if players are doing their social encounters, if they tell me what it is that they want to do, and they can role play up some stuff, I'll often give them some sort of benefit. I might lower the difficulty for it. I might give them a bonus die or something like that, because they're role playing out the social encounter. If they want to just resolve social encounters strictly through the dice, that is boring as hell, and I do not encourage that. If they at least have to tell me what it is that they're wanting to do. If there is a mechanic result, like an interrogation, and they want to say that their character would never yield, if the game does have a mechanic such as resist torture drugs, you might have to work out exactly what it is. Like, they obviously yielded something if they failed that roll, but what did they yield? And that might be the better way of looking at it. If like the dice say that you did yield, but you tell me how much you yielded, or you fail your dice roll so bad that you gave up everything. You completely went against whatever your character was dedicated to not say or to say. How do you feel about that? Because that's just another way to look at the obstacle. I mean, it's like saying my character would never miss with a sword. Well, eventually your character is going to miss with a sword. How do you feel about that? But it could just be a different balance that you want to do. Like I said, I'd have to see an example of what specifically you're talking about. And like I said, the situation, the game, all that, it's a bit too nebulous to fully answer whatever it is that you're wanting. And oh, I've hit Some sort of spam bot or something. Okay. It's a miniature I've had for 20 years, still unpainted. The hook core? Oh yeah, I think I showed that in like the last video or 2 videos ago. It's still unpainted. I just haven't had a need to use it. And question: I'm gearing up for a traveler campaign based around guerrilla warfare. How do I show the horrors of guerrilla warfare without losing the shock value to the fact that it's just a game? If a lot of it, I think, could be alluded to. That depends on your players, exactly how you want to show the true horrors of war. I mean, if you think about any game where you've got combat, you could really go dark and really horrible with it and kind of show what exactly happens when you get hit with an axe. If you want to emphasize a little bit more into kind of lean into the actual horrors of something like guerrilla warfare and what all that means, usually what I would recommend for something like that is start off a bit with a bit stronger than they're used to kind of emphasize that this is what you're dealing with, and then after that you can allude, but put it in their head up front certain things that they are going to encounter or they see more often in guerrilla warfare. Make them aware of it, but if you start dwelling on that, it just becomes passé. It just becomes background noise. So bring it to their attention early on. Throw in like kind of an occasional little reminder of this is a thing that's there. This is a thing that your characters are encountering. Bring up anything new or notable different, and then kind of keep it at that, where you're more or less reminding them of something, but tell them up front more than you normally do to kind of emphasize the horror of that particular type of warfare and make them aware of it. But if you dwell too much on it, that's either to start bumming them out or it loses its punch. You become desensitized to it. And if they become desensitized to it, you might as well not have it at all. So I recommend just keeping it as reminders as the campaign or game keeps going after the initial, this is what we're going to do. So hopefully that answers your question. I think you asked a couple times. I don't know. I think I saw that one before when I scrolled back up. Oh, I got a question part 2. The character would never, for example, give in to interrogation with drugs and all that jazz, even when there is a mechanic in the game for such things. If there's a mechanic in the game, such as Cyberpunk has resist, torture, drugs, right? Like that is a skill, of being able to resist torture and resist drugs for interrogations. Then that's mechanically in there. And if they did not make that roll, then they did not make that roll. They yielded something. If it is not in the game, because not all games have a mechanic like that, it's a little bit more open to interpretation. But if they do make a roll and they fail the roll, they have yielded something. They can help determine what maybe that is, but if they're saying it's like I wouldn't do that, even though the rules clearly say that, it's like that person that says I wouldn't miss, even though you clearly missed with your sword. So I want to just kind of discuss exactly what it is. Like, what's the purpose of this rule if they're going to just declare that that's not there, and see exactly what it is that they want. But if they're just going to grind their heels in the ground and say, like, I don't fail because I don't want to fail, you might need to have a discussion, because the other problem is if you yield on that, then what else are you going to be yielding on in the future? You might just need to kind of establish what exactly does that role mean. What would it take for them to yield information if they're saying this deal? Maybe they would bite off their tongue. See, they yielded something. It could be that. It could be physical damage that they're taking because somebody is torturing them. Could be permanent damage they take because somebody is torturing them. Like, hey, you didn't yield anything, but your strength or your constitution or your dexterity is lower because they've broken all the bones in your hand or your feet or something. So they have to give up something. So maybe do that one. Okay, I figure let's go ahead and wrap it up on this one. Many years as a game master, what is the smartest plan your players ever came up with that didn't take 2 hours to come up with? Shit, that's a good question. I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it because I know I'm not going to come up with the best answer initially. I will say that the best plan that I ever really watched, or at least a planning session that didn't take 2 hours, was, and I actually do want to make a video over this part of this topic at some point. We had we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, our kind of first, second edition combobulation of it, and it was going to be a very, very difficult game. The player characters were going to have to fight this big monastery of monks and stuff. And we had 6 players. At the last second, 3 of them ended up failing for various reasons. And so we got 3 players. We're at half power at a scenario that I thought was going to be super duper hard for them to do. And I asked my players, what do you want to do? We can do something else. We can play this. I can tone it down, or you can go at it knowing perfectly well that this is going to be challenging even if you were at full capacity. And they weren't at full capacity. It's like, do you know that going in? And they ended up saying, let's do it full bore. Yeah, I said, okay. And I allowed them to strategize between themselves. And they went through all of their inventories. They actually did an inventory checks on each other. And they came up with the plan of how to do an initial assault with an initial actually retreat involved in the assault. Like we go up, we do all this stuff, and we start falling back. And then as they're coming at us, we start taking them out this way. They very quickly came up with an attack plan that worked so beautifully that despite the odds, despite the fact that I would never write the adventure that difficult for anyone, because they knew it was too difficult for them, because they knew I had designed it for a full party and they were at half that, they absolutely locked into the zone and they took that thing gloriously. And we were able to do it in like one session. So, I mean, they probably spent about an hour mostly inventorying each other, but their plan was really simple, but they knew what each other had, they knew what they had, and they came up with a plan and it absolutely worked. I have found in most plans, if they spend too much time thinking about it, like if we're doing like some sort of big heist, the more time we spend does not necessarily equal a better plan. So we've had ones where they spent 2.5 hours talking, and then it just fell apart. They were mostly using that time to eat up time, to put off the inevitable whatever was going to happen. And that one, if it did take that long, it did feel like it, because they were absolutely locked in the zone, because the players knew it wasn't me just saying this is going to be really tough. They knew for a fact that half the group wasn't there. And I gave them a choice, and they said, nope, let's do it. We got it. And they did. So yes, it was the assault on the monk temple. It was surrounded by a sea of glass. I had stolen the sky skates from the Deserts of Desolation series, where the Ifrit and the Jinn have had a war and it turned the desert into glass. Now there's ships that go across it with these kind of diamond-edged skates that sail across the sea of glass. So they were circling it in their ship as these monks were coming at them. Fantastic game, so much fun. But that was the best plan they ever did. And the 3 players that were there have referenced that one a lot. And we did that 2007, I think is when that game was. And my wife still talks about that one. So that's about it. Anyways, I think that this will be the end of the stream. I am ready to get up and do other stuff. Those are great modules from X-Rider. They are some pretty good modules. I have ripped off a lot from the Deserts of Desolation series. But yeah, the second one, I think, was the second one where the purple worms coming out is the Sea of Glass. That's totally where I stole all that stuff from. That was in that adventure. Ripped the hell off of that stuff. But anyways, Hope everyone has a good day. I actually do have another video that'll be posting tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll be talking about a mother's love. So that's actually done. It's in the pipe. Right now, my Patreons are getting an early peek at it, but I'll post it publicly tomorrow at some point and let everybody get to do it, since I finally going to talk about this right here and my debut scenario that was in it. So that'll be there. But anyways, thanks for coming by and chatting and just bullshitting with me on a nice Sunday. I haven't had I don't have too much time alone in the house. My wife actually went out, so I was like, I'm gonna do a live thing because she doesn't have to worry about being quiet all day since we've been quarantining away for the past year. And so that's part of why it was. Also, on my birthday last week, I was supposed to have a live stream last week, but I didn't mention it because then I felt like crap. So since I officially hit 30 years of gaming last week, so we'll consider this my birthday stream, even though it's a little late. But anyways, everybody have a wonderful evening, and thank you for coming and just shooting the shit with me for the past couple hours. But then have a great day.